And that's
It,
what it's like when you're really playing, and you're in that zone. You feel like you're just channeling the music, right? It doesn't feel like you're doing it. Like I go back and I listen to myself from 20 or 30 years ago, even pieces that I wrote, and I think, who was that person? I don't I don't recognize it. It was like something else was. It was a different person, and you're kind of channeling something that's not ego based. It's not really about you. It's about unraveling the music.
you're listening to The Thinning. Let's see what opens up. Kurt, welcome, and thank you for being on the program today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your background and about how music is a part of your life. And the bigger question is, do you still love it after being a musician for years and years and years?
Yeah, so music has been a part of my life since I was a kid. It was a big part of my family's life. We were very a family that sang together all the time, especially with my dad. He was always in choirs. His father was a violinist, and he was just a passionate singer. So it was basically my sister and I. We would just sing with my dad pretty much every night before bed, and sometimes during the day, and to the point where I thought it was kind of strange when I met friends in the neighborhood, and I said, "Well, don't you sing with your parents? That's weird." So it was just a big part of my life, and then of course I got into lessons pretty early. By the time I was 5 or 6, my dad had me taking accordion and trumpet lessons, and I didn't like it. He made me practice 45 minutes a day on each instrument, and you're a kid, you kind of buck against that a little bit. But by the time I got
Sure.
to be a teenager, I could play pretty well. But also I heard some music that was outside of what I was practicing. I heard Gustav Holst, The Planets, and I heard some Duke Ellington for the first time. And with both of those, I just lit up. And from that point on, I started practicing probably 3, 4 hours a day, maybe much to the chagrin of my family, who had to listen to this all the time. And I was just hooked. So by the time I was 16, 17, I was working professionally in the Detroit area. And just that was it. I was a professional musician. That's all I did. I didn't really have a job till I became a university professor.
And you bring that accordion to a party today, and you are a smash hit, man. You're bringing it down. That's terrific.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I play it at my parents' nursing home, and they love it. So I'll go around a little bit and just play folk
Of course
tunes,
they
and
do.
everybody
Yeah.
perks up. If they're in the wheelchair, not looking at anything, and then all of a sudden I come in playing, then they're clapping along, and it's really quite remarkable.
Yeah, and so I could probably throw all kinds, since we're our ages are somewhat similar. I could probably throw out some names like Stan and Yash Schmangi of the Happy Wanderers, and
Oh
you'd
yeah,
know who I'm talking about.
oh yeah,
Everybody knows Eugene Levy today,
right,
and
right.
everybody knows him from Schitt's Creek, but nobody remembers
Remember,
the Schmengis. That
yep,
was the best comedy of all time, which is
that was
musical
hilarious.
comedy, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So a typical path in a lot of ways. Music was kind of in the family, and then
Yep,
you heard something, and it lit you up, and it changed everything.
it did.
You
Yeah.
Do you remember that experience? Do you remember what it felt like?
I just remember hearing the Holst on the NPR station in Detroit, the public broadcasting station in Detroit, and I was just transfixed because I'd never heard sounds like that and
Yeah.
harmonies like that. And the same thing with the Ellington. It was a totally different style, but it both just pulled me in. And I guess my question was, how do you make those sounds? Like who are these people, and how are they able to make music that sounds like this? So
Yeah.
that's what really grabbed me. And then that was my pursuit, was wanting to learn how to write music that was maybe not that quality, but that I understood how it all worked, and to perform it and to be part of that. So and that's all I did until I decided to go back to school in my late 20s, and get degrees, and that's the story. Yeah.
Okay, and then you moved in. You said you were a professional musician. You said you know
Hmm.
what was the shape that that took?
A lot of it was kind of doing just gig work, right? Concerts with jazz stuff was kind of on the side for the most part. But to make a living, I had to do, weddings, parties, bar mitzvahs, corporate stuff. Just kind of the what
Yeah,
most musicians do, unless you're Keith Jarrett or you're Brad Mehldau or something, then you're making a living just playing
right.
your own music. But a couple tiers under that, and you're doing studio work, you're doing gigs, parties, all that stuff, and kind of piecing together a living, plus a little teaching too. So you're teaching at the beginning of the week when there aren't a lot of gigs, and that's what I did, and made a pretty good living at it too.
Yeah, my grandmother, my I didn't know my grandfather on my dad's side, but my grandmother met her husband, my grandfather, playing. She was a piano player, and he was a sax player, and they met playing in silent movies,
Oh
playing in the
wow.
orchestra for silent movies in Eastern North Carolina. And again, my I didn't really know my grandfather. He died when I was really young, but my I remember my grandmother, just she loved to play, and her favorite thing to say was, there's just nothing in the world as good as playing Coming Around the Mountain for a bunch of drunks. And she was serious. She was really serious. She's like, just being in the middle of it and playing is there's just nothing like it. I used to play with a group of guys in college. We kept playing for years afterwards and doing gigs. And I, uh, I, I feel like I've never done cocaine, but I feel like, the feeling that I had playing with those guys probably is a little
It,
bit what, like, you know, doing coke is like. There's something about it that nothing can compare
yeah,
to.
it's a buzz
And yeah,
for
and
sure.
I don't get to I took on the role of a clergy person, and that was pretty much the end of it. I couldn't sustain
Yeah,
it anymore. I had to if you have one time where you can't show up for a gig because you had to do something else, and you can't control in a church when somebody dies or somebody gets sick, you don't get
yeah,
called back.
yeah, yeah.
That's it. So that's where it all kind of went for me. But once it's in you, it defines everything. I still say that I kind of see the world through the lens of a bass player. It's I'm not I'm not out there in front. I'm just kind of laying it down. But if you're doing your job as a bass player, you're kind of dictating where everybody else is going. And jazz has been a big part of your life, right? And there's a difference between what do you find is the difference between the Gustav Holst classical styles and Ellington, the jazz stuff? What do you think is the real difference there?
Well, I think it's the way that the music is made in jazz, that it's a collaborative, improvisatory effort rather than something that's written down and doesn't change. So every performance is a little bit different. Even when Ellington is playing the same tunes with his big band, there's different inflections. The tempo might be a little faster, might be a little bit slower. The solos are all different. So I think that's one of the big differences in terms of how they're made. Jazz is really a music that is hard to pin down as a genre because there are so many different styles that are also different. But the one thing that's the same is that they're all collaborative music making in the moment, and they all of the styles subsume local culture wherever they are and change the music subtly. So I think that's the big one of the big differences, I guess.
And I remember when I was in music school, I my teacher, my professor told me that don't you can play all the jazz you want, you can study all the jazz you want, but don't try to pursue a jazz degree because it won't buy you anything, won't get you anything.
Uh-huh.
If you have a degree in classical bass playing, then you can find you can find a way to play jazz, but you can, if you have a classical degree, then you can possibly get, something else, another kind of gig to put bread on the plate.
Yeah.
Um, but the funny thing was that the all the the music school is kind of divided into classical players and jazz players, but the
Hmm.
classical players were, they referred to themselves, or the jazz players referred to them as legit players.
Legit players. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Which is
So
weird.
I guess, right. So, and that's interesting, I think. So can you say something a little bit about, describe to the viewers what this divide really is like, and why by implication jazz was considered illegitimate?
Yeah, I think some of the early jazz players were kind of self-taught, and maybe some of them didn't read music very well. So that was, I think, one of the breaking points there. That like Chet Baker, right? He was self-taught. I don't think he was someone that could sit down and read a part. It was all done by ear. So that kind of led to that. Well, they're legit players because they can read music and they know what's going on. They know the harmonies that are being played. They know their instruments. Where these other guys are kind of self-taught. But I think it's funny that jazz players took that on and actually said, yeah, they're legit players, because it's a slam on the jazz players. But I think the jazz players have always liked kind of being the streetwise kind of street cred, streetwise tough guys, bad boys to a certain degree. So I think they kind of like that, to say, that's the legit guys. We're the cool guys. We're on the street. We're doing our own thing. Um, but I would also say what's funny is that you've mentioned that you shouldn't do a jazz degree because if you do the classical degree, there'll be work for you. My experience has been that the jazz players are the ones that can do any gig, right? If you're a good
Yeah.
jazz player, you can do wedding gigs, you can do a rock gig, you can do a country gig, you can do a salsa gig, you can do anything. And so the jazz players, like my students that study jazz, some of them are just they've got great careers in music, whereas most of the classical players, because they can only do one thing, it's tougher that way, right? There's less students. So I think the jazz thing sort of makes it possible for you to go into almost any musical role, including producer, arranger, and player, and thrive, where the classical players aren't trained that way.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because when you do jazz at a professional level, you understand the harmony. So you know the tunes, you know the forms, you know the scales, you know the possible harmonies that you could use if you wanted to change the harmony around, and you've got a really keen sense of rhythm. So you're a groove-based player. So you can move into virtually any style of music, pop music, of course, jazz, rock, country, whatever, any music that relies on a groove, and you can thrive there, because none of that music has more difficult harmony or melody than jazz has. So you've got, jazz, you're lifting 150 pounds. You go to any other of those styles of music, and it's like, oh, this is 75 pounds. I can do this, right? Because they're so much simpler than jazz is.
And then and I'm just still kind of ruminating on the whole idea of legit. The jazz guys that I knew would to say that somebody was a legit player, uh was to say, well, I mean, that was disparaging, right? It's like, oh, so and so is so and so is great. You're talking to somebody, oh, they're a great sax player. Oh, well, yeah, but they're primarily legit.
Right.
And that was that was kind of a, yeah, but they're not one of us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
because you're almost saying, when you say a legit player, you're saying that player can only play one style, where I can play a dozen. I can play any style you give me, because I've got the ears, I've got the harmonic chops, I've got the rhythm chops, and I've got the melodic chops. I can be a chameleon and slip into whatever band you want me to be in, and I may not be the best in that chair, but I'll be pretty damn close in a pretty short period of time.
including playing Holst.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you
Hmm.
can you can jump into that role too. I mean, obviously it's a different scene today than it was in the 50s when Coltrane, was doing his thing. It's not like he would be able to just slide into that space, but still today music school kids, I think, and I'm, sorry kids. I'm showing my biases here. I listen to some of these guys like, Snarky Puppy, and I hear
Yeah.
Corey Wong and everything he's dealing with and the arrangements and these, it's just, it's absolutely mind blowing. So, all right. So we've kind of established that we have a common language to speak here, I
For
think, which
sure.
is
Yeah.
great. I want to talk about some, if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk about, a grand mystery that I don't know. We can break music down in all kinds of, even mathematical ways, and
Hmm.
I know you have something to say about that, and I want to hear it, but there's something, we tend to think about, we think about music as being a technical process that we teach our kids to play, according to some very technical and kind of, this is how you start with the method books, and you start doing these things, and you learn and you progress, and then if you practice enough, you will become a a proficient musician. But we also know a lot of people who never did those things,
Hmm.
and they are mind-blowingly, I you heard Ellington, I heard Jaco Pastorius,
Mm.
when I was a teenager, and when I heard that playing, it was, I all I knew was I gotta figure out how to do that.
Same
I gotta
thing.
learn how
Yeah.
to do that.
Hmm.
And it's as if it came from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Um
And that's
it,
what it's like when you're really playing, and you're in that zone. You feel like you're just channeling the music, right? It doesn't feel like you're doing it. Like I go back and I listen to myself from 20 or 30 years ago, even pieces that I wrote, and I think, who was that person? I don't I don't recognize it. It was like something else was, it was a different person, and you're kind of channeling something, that's not ego based. It's not really about you. It's about unraveling the music.
so so my oldest son, I we've got music in our family, we've got music in our background. I My brother played, everybody in my family's played. Music's always been important, but my oldest son, I remember when he was just a little kid, and I'm talking 3 2 3 years old. When he was 3 years old, he could play, he could bang on the pots and pans well enough that I traded in an old bass that I had and got him an actual drum set. And he could sit down and play at age 4. For his 4th birthday, he got a drum set and he could play. And I remember that, we used to sit in the basement and I would play, we played the Black Crowes version of Hard to Handle. And as
Uh-huh.
a 4-year-old, he could lay it down.
Wow.
And then, more strange than that, he could sit down at the piano and compose and just play. He could just sit down and play. And he played chords that were bigger and, much more expansive than anything he had ever heard.
Huh.
And I had the ear to know that these weren't just chords that he was just kind of like hammering out stuff. He was playing stuff that was resolving. One chord was resolving into the next. And it had, it didn't have structure and flow the way it should as a discipline, but it was stuff that he should not have been capable of doing.
Hmm.
And so, his mother and I just were like, well, this child needs lessons. He needs discipline. He needs to learn how to play. He's got a gift. And then we destroyed it by giving him lessons. We absolutely, because the lessons couldn't, the piano teacher in our town just couldn't, she's got a program and she had to teach the program and it didn't fit with him, and so, he still has, but that ability to just sit down and compose went away eventually. It wasn't just the lessons. I think this is what I'm finding, is that there is this thing that happens with kids where they just are able to do just this extraordinary stuff. And then it kind of fades out by the time they're 8 or 9, can't do it anymore. You ever heard of that?
Well, I mean, if you look back at some of the classical composers, or even some of the jazz musicians, they're just, like Herbie Hancock just emerging on the scene. What was he, 18 or, 18, 19 years old? I mean, and, he was playing with the Chicago Symphony when he was 10, 11 years old, something like that. Like, there's not enough time in your life to practice to get that good. Right. When you're 5. Or Mozart. Mozart, he's 5 years old or 4 years old. He just walks over to the piano and plays what his sister had been playing and didn't play the piano. So, what is that? It's some kind of...
Wrote the Magic Flute when he was 8.
Mm-hmm.
His first opera when he was 8 years old.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So I'm a big fan of... I don't know what he's doing now, but when he was a young, not even a teenager yet, Joey Alexander was playing at Carnegie Hall, playing jazz at Carnegie Hall. He was playing some of the most difficult jazz. He's a piano player. For those of you who don't know, look him up. Please do yourself a favor and look up Joey Alexander. But he was playing Giant Steps, John Coltrane composition that uses a chord. Even when Coltrane recorded this, the piano player, you can hear that the piano player can't quite do it. He can't do it. And here's Joey as a 10-year-old playing it, and not just playing it like a kid would play in a piano recital. He is owning it. It's his.
Yeah.
And there come these, I guess we call them prodigies, but I don't think that says it. In other words, I think what I'm trying to get at is that I really do wonder if music is a spiritual thing, if it comes from somewhere else. Wonder what you've got to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I clearly it does. I mean, it's such a weird thing that we do as human beings, and we're so tied up with it emotionally, and we use it in for spiritual purposes. We use it in church, and that's a different style of music, of course. But I think it's hard to contest that that music somehow bears our soul in a very, very deep way that nothing else really does, because it does so even without words. We're just making sound, and it has that effect on us. So I think it's hard to contest that there's something very deep and special, spiritual about how music, how we interact and how we make music.
There are some almost mathematical kinds of qualities. There are things, there are chords that sound happy. There are chords that sound sad. There are chords, I think of a major 7 chord in a plagal cadence. Boy, we're going to go really, we got to drop the lingo here, but we've got one chord that you just drop it down a 4th in the scale. And man, there's so many songs, that use this that are so melancholy. If you want to just write the most melancholy sounding thing in the world, play a major 7 chord and then drop it down a 4th to another major 7 chord. And it's just, what makes a song, I mean, just from a technical standpoint, what makes a chord sound happy and what makes one sound sad?
Well, that's a great question. And I've had students ask me that over the years. And And they've asked me so many times, and I explained it kind of halfway the way I thought about it. Eventually I thought I should write a paper about this and really dig into it to see if I can kind of prove what my theory is about why the minor chord is a sad chord. So I'll start with a little bit of physics here. I promise I won't go too deep, but
Nah, go
um,
for it.
to start with, um, when you play any note, so if I play a C, okay, so I'm playing that note C, right? So you think, well, you're just playing one note. Well, you are, but that C is made up of many other pitches that are called partials. So they're part of the makeup of C, but they're played because you're playing C. So those partials that's called the harmonic series, and it's kind of the law that governs sound. So any sound you make is going to be that sound primarily, but then it's also made up of these other pitches that get closer and closer together as they go up. So if you have that diagram, that first example, you could show that, and it'll show, okay, so when you play a C, the first note is C, okay? But in that C, to some degree, is the C above it. And in that C, to some degree, is the G above that. That's the third partial. The fourth partial is C again, right? So what's interesting is that the fifth partial is E. So within the first five partials, you get the major chord. And that's why we have a major chord. What you're doing when you're playing the major chord is you're reinforcing what's already there in the harmonic series, and it's fairly consonant. So the other thing that's weird is that the pitches in the harmonic series are directly their placement in the harmonic series are directly related to the string lengths needed to make that sound. So if I play the first C, and let's say that's a string length of 4 feet. The second C, which is number 2, is half that. So it's a string length of 2 feet. The fourth one is a string length of 1 foot. The eighth one is half a foot, and so on. So what we have embedded there is basically the binary series: 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. And people our age remember, hey, wait a minute, that's got something to do with computers. That was the memory thing, right? You'd buy 512 megabytes or 256 megabytes as memory. So that binary series is at the heart of the computers that we're using to have this conversation right now. It's also at the heart of life. So when a sperm meets an egg, it becomes one cell, and then that cell splits into two, and then the two go into four, and then the four go into eight. So this is kind of a mysterious coincidence, I guess, that not only is it in those places and it's the heart of our computer system, it's also at the basis of music. So why do we call the C's C? They're completely different notes, right? Well, the reason we call them all C, we call them an octave. They're in octaves, right? Um, so why is that? They're different notes. Well, what we're hearing when we play the C's together, the higher C just sounds like a higher version of the lower C. They sound like the same note in different registers. And the reason for that is because the string lengths are all based on factor of 2. So they are entirely symmetrical. So if you could show that some of those pictures in those diagrams, that there's a beautiful pattern there when you have a 2 or a 1 and then a 2 and then 4, that each one of these cuts them in half, right? And so it's quite a beautiful picture. So our ear recognizes that symmetry. We understand, oh, that's easy to hear. But when we have something that's not symmetrical, say this, so that there's no symmetry there. And what our ear does is it says, we recognize that there's no symmetry there, and we'd like that symmetry or that asymmetry to go away. And the ear supplies the closest factor of 2 to the bad note. So the ear says, well, if we go from So I'll play a little example here, and I'll ask you to sing what you think the next note should be. So, you ready? Okay, so here we
Let's
go.
go. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So the freaky thing is, I mean, you're a musician, but you can do this with anyone, and they're going to sing the C. The weird thing is, I didn't play a C. So your brain calculated that and sent a message instantly to your
Yeah.
vocal cords, and it said the note we want you to sing is going to resolve the asymmetry. It's going to resolve the complex waveforms and give us symmetry. So it's that power of our auditory system that makes music possible, because without that, we would not be able to have musical narrative. So you're hearing music, you're expecting something, and the composer can say, well, I'll give you what you expect, or I can surprise you and not give you what you expect. And then your brain is calculating the math to say, okay, where are we now? I'm still looking for that symmetry, but the tune has moved on somewhere else. So that's a really peculiar thing. That's what I started asking about evolution, is why do we have that? Why does our brain calculate the solution to an asymmetrical wave instantly, and it's a mathematical calculation? Why do we have that? What could that have possibly?
And it's intuitive. Yeah, it's intuitive.
Yeah, it happens. It happens automatically. It happens immediately, and most people don't even realize that that's what's happening in there. So,
and Hans Zimmer has made an entire career out of scoring movies where that doesn't happen.
Yes, exactly. But without it, we wouldn't have music, because without it, music we wouldn't be able to expect a certain chord or not expect a certain chord.
Right.
And so that would take away music's narrative power completely.
Right.
So it's a strange question.
So why do we have that? Why is that built into humanity?
Well, I looked into the evolutionary part of it, because I thought, okay, I'll see what they have to say. And there were a lot of explanations, some of them, frankly, quite bizarre, that you just say, you're just stretching it to try and find an answer. There were questions like, well, it helped social cohesion because people could sing together. But that doesn't answer the question, right? So there was one person, 250,000 years ago who could hear, who wanted to hear the resolution of an asymmetrical waveform. What advantage did it give that person in terms of procreation or in terms of ability to gather resources? I cannot come up with anything. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Chicks dig resolution? I don't know. I mean, what?
There was actually one of the studies that I read was, and they kind of said, yeah, now we've figured it out. They said that they did an experiment with, I don't know how many women, and they said when they were ovulating, they liked more complex music and complex shapes. Therefore, the cave women, there'd be like a caveman band making complex music. I mean, you just say, this is absurd, and you're using it, and you're using modern women, and you're saying, like, what are you even talking about? What's complex music in 250,000 years ago or 150,000 years ago? What does that even mean? Wow. And then I thought, well, if that's true, then why aren't there all kinds of teenage girls at the symphony concerts trying to meet Beethoven? They're all into Mick Jagger,
right?
Which is not complex music. Anyway, I'm kind of being a little facetious there, but so those were the
fair enough.
That's when I just thought, this doesn't make sense. You're not explaining this, and it's such a huge thing.
Yeah. So, okay. So we've posed a question, but we've really got no answer for it.
Right.
But there has to be. I mean, there really has to be, because it is such a universal experience. What do you know about societies that don't go with a Western scale, a Western 12-tone scale? Is there anything going on there that hits this, or what?
I don't think so. No, because most of the folk musics around the world are very simple, pentatonic based, like Native
Yeah,
American music. A lot of the Eastern European music has pentatonic or hexatonic qualities. Aboriginal music in Australia has that. The Asian uh, folk music relies heavily on the pentatonic
pentatonic.
scale. So that all implies exactly what is at work here. It's just the major scale and the full chromatic scale just really increase the complexity level quite a bit. So I don't think there are any I don't think you can find anomalies there with Indian music, because they're using such complex scales and rhythms, but those are generally done under a pedal. And that pedal, when you have a pedal tone, you can pretty much do anything over top of it, and you're still maintaining some semblance of tonality. So I
And
don't
a,
think there
and,
are
and a
any
pedal
exceptions.
tone is just a like a straight, it's a kind of
Yep.
ethnic music that we often hear where there's just a straight tone. I know in Armenia, I'm a big fan of duduk music,
Hmm.
which the viewer probably, if there's any one of you that knows what I'm talking about here, please, say so in the comments. I would love to hear it. But it's a very mournful. You don't know what the duduk is, but I know you've heard it. You've heard
Yeah.
it in movie soundtracks. It's that very mournful, uh, very expressive woodwind thing from Armenia, a piece of apricot wood cut from a particular part of the apricot wood log. It's remarkable. But it's a melody played over a straight tone. And wow, it's really, really powerful, emotional music.
Hmm. Yeah, which
So
with a pedal, that's really how it works. You can do anything over a pedal, and you don't lose that center of tonality. It's when you don't have a pedal and you do that it kind of gets a little bit wonky.
in bagpipes.
Yeah, bagpipes
Yeah.
pedal there, and really I mean, so much pop music, the verse is a pedal.
Hmm.
When you think about, but pop music tunes, there may be stuff, there may be slight shifts in the chords, but basically the verses are just a pedal with just some slight movements up and down, and that's it. So we have a lot of that in popular music as well, and in jazz.
Yeah, and my job as a bass player was always to lay down the pedal, but do it in a way that had movement and motion, which is not very pedal like, but it has to always imply the pedal. It always has to lead to
Yep.
the root tone
Yep.
of the chord, even when the root chord is moving around. So yeah, wow, we're gonna have to require a music theory course, I think, before people listen to this episode. I
Oh.
apologize for all that, but it's really it's hard to talk about. It's hard to understand, talk about outside of lingo. I'm not a big fan,
Yeah.
especially in church matters. I'm really not a big fan of lingo and acronyms and things like that, because it's exclusive. It keeps
Hmm.
people out. It doesn't invite people in. But there are some things, I think, some concepts that you just can't really talk about other than by using certain kind of
Yep.
trade speak, I think.
Yeah, there's no way around it,
Yeah,
but we'll
yeah.
try and keep
So
it to a minimum.
so you've got another problem that I want to see if you've got any insight into. You've got this this issue where music seems to come from somewhere else. And I'm going to be doing an interview next week with a woman who is the drummer in a Led Zeppelin tribute band,
Oh,
and
cool.
she's also a channeler. She also claims to channel spirits, and a
Oh.
lot of people would say that that music is, when you're performing music, that at its highest level you're channeling spirits. And so we're going to actually talk about what it's like to channel John Bonham, and
Wow.
I mean, and I'm really interested to see how that goes, if she can really talk about it, that, you know, she's actually channeling, you know, this guy, or if it's, you know, there's something else. I suspect there's something else going on there. I suspect that there's not just like a spirit talking to her, but there's something more universal. Thinking about, you know, in my early days of, you know, in theology school, learning about this concept. I think it was Aristotelian nominalism, that there was an idea in the Middle Ages where, you know, you've got a table, and then you've got tableness. You've got the principle of tableness, that the table comes from, and you've got, you know, everything, every material thing has kind of its spiritual equivalent that's in a, you know, maybe in a higher dimension or something like that.
Yeah,
And I wonder about that as being music as being the most tangible example of that kind of thing that we have here in this life.
yeah, I remember that too. That wasn't that the with Plato and the perfect forms, that there was like an ideal form
Right.
of everything that exists, you know, kind of somewhere, and we're just kind of trying to get there by making our non-idealized versions of those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and you know, I think like Schopenhauer said that music was the most perfect example of our will as as humans. That's what we're listening to when we're listening to music. You're listening to the pure essence of who you are, kind of stripped of all of the you know, all of the your name and your personality and all that. It was kind of a distilled, I don't know, soul, I guess. So
Yeah.
people have been kind of wondering about that for a long time. Nietzsche said, "Without music, life would be a mistake." So what does that mean? And I wonder about that myself too. So it if we didn't have music, how deprived would our lives be? So you know, when you put it in that context, I think because we have so much music around us, we just take it for granted. But when you think about what it would be like if we didn't have this art form, like all of the other art forms would be hurt by it. You couldn't have movies, you know, you couldn't have song, you couldn't have opera. You know, what would that be like? When you know, when you put it in context like that, I think it shows that it's a bigger thing than we generally give it credit for.
Yeah, there's some videos out there that some stuff on social media that I run across with the scenes from movies without the music, without the musical score behind them,
Oh yeah.
yeah, you
It,
just, you know, these big scenes, you know, Voldemort appearing in Harry Potter, you
yeah,
know, and this, and no music, no sound, it's
it
pretty laughable.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're relying on your brain while you're watching it. Your brain is calculating the symmetrical qualities or the asymmetrical qualities. So when they're building tension, what they're doing is they're giving you asymmetrical waveform, and so you've got a 13 against a 7 or a 5 against a 9, and those don't line up. You want the twos, the fours, the eights, the 16s, right? And so that's what they're playing with. They're using that faculty that we have, and they're toying with your mathematical calculation of sound waves to match the tension in the music. So the good ones are really, really good at it, like Hans Zimmer or you know
like Hans Zimmer. And
John Williams.
I'm thinking about the soundtrack of the Christopher Nolan movie Inception, where
Hmm.
the whole the tension in the movie is just hammered. It just wouldn't be the same movie
Hmm.
if you didn't have these big chords that are just slamming into each other, and they don't resolve. They don't land where you want them
Yep.
to land. And that is, it's not an abstract idea. It's what makes that movie.
Yeah.
You know, if you love the movie, if you don't love the movie, then you know, I get it. But because some of Nolan's movies are fairly inaccessible to mere mortals. I had to watch that one like
I,
8 times
yeah, I
before I
know.
even started to get it. But there's, you know, the music operated on such a level that you would enjoy the movie whether you understood it or not.
And it
And
speaks to the universalism of it too, right? It's
yeah,
not like you're saying, well, that the music works that way in Western European societies. No, it works that way everywhere because we
it
all
does.
have that same faculty where the brain is able to recognize the symmetry and the asymmetry, and it's supplying the solution to the asymmetry. And what they're doing is they're giving you almost the solution, but you don't get it. And then they keep stretching that out, stretching that out, stretching that out. And in the process, that tension is building inside of you, which is just remarkable.
And if the scoring, if the musical score is really done right, you probably don't even hear it.
Yeah,
That's why, yeah, I'm kind of not a big fan of John Williams and the score to Star Wars, because you know the theme, you get it, you hear it, you know that you can hum along with it. But the greatest film scores that I can think of, in my opinion,
hmm
people have different feelings about music, and that's all fine. But to me, the real magic is when it's there and it's pivotal, but you don't really notice it.
Yep, but you're noticing the effects. Like you're
Right.
feeling that tension. You're feeling the resolution when something finally does stop, or you feel when the plot twist happens that you've been fooled. And the
Yeah.
music does the same thing, right? Because
Mm.
you're expecting something, and they can either give you what you're expecting or give you something surprising. And that's the magic of it. That's the unanswered question that I don't think evolution has provided an answer for.
So then there are other, you played us the technical term would be a minor second. It was a
Yeah.
half step up from the
Yep.
tone, from the root, and we want it to resolve. What is, when in medieval speak, what is the devil's interval?
Oh, well, that's the tritone. So here's a tritone. Ooh. So you'll note it's featured in the Simpsons theme quite prominently. Uh, yeah. So it's an interval that they called the devil's interval back in the Middle Ages, because it really has no. It splits the octave up directly in half. So it's this strange interval that if you go up a tritone and then you go up a tritone from that note, you get the same note that you started on. So it's called a dyad of, oh, I don't want to get too technical here, but it has a spooky kind of sound to it, right? Because you don't know. I think it's because you don't know where the center is. Like if you play other intervals, yeah, that's good. If I play, it's nice. But if I play a tritone, it's kind of unsettled. It doesn't
Yeah.
have a center to it, and I think that's why. I think that kind of spookiness is why they gave it that name.
And typically, traditionally, where does the when you play a tritone, where does it resolve? How does it resolve?
Oh, it's actually if you have it as the third and seventh of a dominant seventh chord. So here's the tritone, right? So it's
Well
actually
done.
it actually works quite nicely when it's in a dominant seventh chord. But
Yeah.
they stopped worrying about that, or that's pretty old term, so that's not really
Sure.
considered that way anymore. But
Sure. Yeah. But there was a time in my music history years, or my music history courses, there was a time when that was, you really wanted to
yeah,
stay off of that. You wanted to resolve that as fast as you can.
yes, that, and it would have to resolve, right? So they did treat it very carefully, and
Yeah.
you find it being used like that quite a bit in classical music.
Yeah. Yeah. You might be able to tell that I'm not a big fan of Handel, of Georg Friedrich Handel,
Oh,
because my sense is that he's got to resolve every two measures. Everything has to resolve. It just can't leave anything hanging there for even the smallest little increment.
yeah, cool. Yeah,
Beautiful in itself, I
yeah,
guess, but I'm just, it's not my thing.
yeah.
So okay, we're going to go back to this issue and then we're going to wrap up. But this issue of kids, young people who have musical abilities that are far beyond their years, that can't be explained by the amount of time they're spent practicing and getting better. The fact that they peak out pretty early, really. They get to be they show their musical talent at a young age, and then it really doesn't improve any. Again, Jocko would be a fine
Mm-hmm.
example of that, as far as I'm concerned. Really
Mm-hmm.
went downhill after he splashed big when he was young, and then when he was sought after, really started to lose it, and then
Mm-hmm.
died tragically,
Mm-hmm.
which is another common theme. We think of all kinds of composers that showed that kind of early talent, wowed everybody, became very popular, and then we're either never really able to do it again, or just died tragically.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Again, there's something about this kind of talent that I think is it comes from people that, or comes through people that can't, because of it, somehow just can't live in this world, can't be part of this world because of what they because of the beauty and the innovation that is expressed through them. Ever thought about that?
Yeah, I've thought about it a lot, especially with my students over the years, because I'd have a lot of high school students that would come in and they want to learn jazz, and you say, okay, well, we'll start. Most of them will go on week by week get a little bit better. I had one student who came to me as an 11-year-old, and he played a little bit of classical, and the first lesson was 3 hours long because I didn't want to let him go because he was just gobbling it all up.
Wow.
And I just recognized right away there's something different about this kid. He would absorb the ideas very quickly. He could very quickly, within a week or two, he would be able to do things that other students would take months to do. And I don't think he was practicing all that much. So there's got to be something there, whether it's a cognitive thing or something that in their physical makeup and the way their nervous system is wired, or the way they're hearing things, that they're able to translate what's in their ears to their fingers very quickly, um, that other people just don't have. And I think that's what you're seeing when you see a Keith Jarrett or again, Brad Maldau or a Bill Evans or any of those top level players. They probably had pretty good skills when they were young, because I don't think you practice your way into being that good. There's
Yeah.
something else there. But I don't think it's just music, right? Sports too. It's in other areas that people have certain kind of talents, maybe in math or in I think it's probably an IQ thing, really, is somehow there's something, something, the way that they're put together just has things that most people just don't have.
Yeah.
But there's
Yeah.
also the spiritual part of it too that I think you can't get away from.
That we should have evolved somehow, but we can't nail that down. We can't figure out why. We can't just say, yeah, cave chicks really like the guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy, this has gone south real quick. Yeah, well, how do we find out? How do we connect with you? How can we find out more of what you're up to and what you're where do you live right now? You still in the Detroit area, or
I'm in Michigan. I'm in West Michigan, just outside of Grand Rapids, so not that
okay?
far from the Big Lake.
And do you
And
play? Are you playing anywhere? Do you still play, or do
I
you
don't
just primarily teach?
I
Yeah.
don't play anymore. I have a genetic condition with my hands, and I had to give it up about 15 years ago or so.
Oh,
Yeah, it was not a good time, but other
oh,
doors opened up, and I started doing a lot of writing, and that kind of has started or began an entirely new road on my career. So it's been great.
okay. All right.
And you,
Well,
you
how to?
you you can find me. My website is kurtellenberger.com. That's all E's, and my name is with a K. I also am a contributing editor at allaboutjazz.com, where you can find all my articles. So I have an article about music and evolution. I have an article about why minor chords are sad. I have an article about why Christmas music is jazzy. So there's all kinds of stuff there that people might be interested in.
All right, and one final question. I'm taking a real risk here. Which is the saddest of all keys?
Well, that would be D minor, of course.
Well done, well done. That's a Spinal Tap reference.
Oh yeah,
for
oh
you
yeah.
folks. Okay. This has been fun. You've made my day, and I hope there's some worth of any of this to the listener. So thanks so much. This is
Oh,
great.
thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
This has been fun.